welcome along to the Property Academy podcast by Obus Partners. I'm your host, Ed McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today's show, we're talking about the top 100 suburbs to buy a house in and invest in 2025. And this actually comes from the New Zealand Herald, who released their list of the hot 100 New Zealand suburbs. So we're going to talk about what those top 100 suburbs are, whereabouts they are in the country, and the different factors that led these specific suburbs to be called the Hot 100, and we'll also talk about whether we agree with the Herald or not. Now, Andrew, walk us through what are the top five in the Hot 100, and we'll go in reverse order.
Okay, number 5, Mangere in Auckland, which I know that we've been talking about for a long while. You would have heard about that on the podcast before. Number 4, Christchurch and Sydenham.
Christchurch is a suburb.
All right, Sydenham and Christchurch. I was going to do it the reverse way around. Okay.
And you messed it up like usual. And so that's number 4, Sydenham and Christchurch. Number 3,
Otahuhu in Auckland. Number 2, Mount Wellington in Auckland. Auckland's getting a lot of these places. And number 1, East Tamaki in Auckland.
Okay, that's really interesting. So of those top 5, we're looking at kind of 4 in Auckland. They've said 1 in Christchurch.
Which is interesting because Auckland's had a really rough time recently, right? The prices have dropped. It's been slow to rent stuff there. So I wondered whether or not maybe this wouldn't feature as much, because I agree that Auckland's a great place to invest right now or buy right now, but I'm surprised that the New Zealand Herald are thinking about the same thing given all the negative publicity that it's getting.
Well, it's quite interesting because a lot of people will want to know how this is put together. And so some of you guys will know that I write a lot for One Roof, and so I call up Owen Vaughan, the editor of One Roof, quite frequently. And he let me know that this was coming, and he explained the reason why. He was saying there used to be this real estate company that used to put out the list of like top 10 suburbs or whatever. I think it was for commercial property. And without doubt, the top 10 suburbs were whatever areas they were recommending at the time or had properties in at the time. I can't remember, and so I don't want to throw out a name and then get somebody from their legal team emailing me. Just whisper it to me. What was it?
No, I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay. And so what he did was he partnered up with Velocity, which is a data company, and he said that he wanted to put together an index looking at a whole heap of different factors to try and figure out, well, what is the top suburb or the top list of suburbs that you could potentially look at? And it's quite interesting that, yeah, Auckland and Christchurch do get quite a big push in here. But Andrew, let's talk about what the judging criteria is, because in their list of, top 100 suburbs, they give strengths for every single suburb. So for Mount Wellington, they say it's amenities, which is stuff in the area, stuff to do in the area, employment, so the number of jobs and businesses in the area, and they're also saying new stock, so the number of new houses being built in Mount Wellington. But if we look at all of them, what were the key criteria that they looked at?
So of the 12, the top 3 were affordability, which I absolutely agree with, amenities, so what's in the area, and employment.
Yeah, okay. So they're saying, look, the more affordable a suburb is, the better it is in their analysis. The more stuff to do, the more amenities in the area, sweet, the better the suburb is. And also the more jobs in the area as well. A couple of other things they looked at. Population growth. Yep, I can understand that's pretty important. For investors, rental growth, how fast rents are going up. Yep, that's pretty important as well because that secures your future cash flow. They also factored in things like development land. Talk to us about that.
Well, I think the main thing here is if you've got land which can be developed in the future, then probably you've got to have some gentrification occur. You're going to have some nice new properties in the future. Again, you've got more people wanting to live in that area in the future. So I can see that as a positive.
It might make it a nicer place to live in the future. Interesting that they also include things like resilience to shocks, i.e. how much have house prices gone down over the most recent year or two post the boom, and also ownership mix. How many tenants are there? How many homeowners are there in the area? So pretty comprehensive all up.
It's actually a lot more comprehensive than I would have imagined a newspaper would have come out with.
Oh, you just wait till we release our version of this, which is coming.
If I had $1 for every time I heard that, Ed McKnight.
No. I've actually got the spreadsheet done.
I'm just winding up.
Paid a lot of money to get someone to help me out. And if we look at where these kind of top 100 suburbs are, 22 of them were in Auckland 10 of them were in Christchurch, and then 5 in Lower Hutt. Interesting that Wellington City, which we're calling quite undervalued at the moment, I'm not even sure if there was a single, there were only 2 suburbs from Wellington City that actually made it in. And keep in mind, there are 200,000 people who live in Wellington City. There were the same number of suburbs in the Hot 100 in South Taranaki, where I'm from,
Wow.
as there were in Wellington City. So that tells you something.
That's really interesting.
Why do you think they went for Lower Hutt? Just looking at some of those factors we were just talking about, why might Lower Hutt feature quite high on the list?
Well, I think you've got rental increases there. You've got gentrification. You've got developer land. You've got amenities around there. So of the things that I can remember, it ticks quite a few boxes.
To some degree, the fact that Auckland and Christchurch were out the top in terms of the most suburbs, it's not really that surprising. I suppose same with Lower Hutt, because they are just larger population areas. In fact, one thing I thought about is Auckland's population makes up about a third of our country, but yet it only makes up 22% of the Hot 100. And so actually Auckland is a little bit underrepresented in terms of the total number of Auckland-based suburbs that are on the list. But it's interesting that Auckland features at the higher end of that list. So even if we start looking at the top 10 and look at positions 6 to 10, there's another Christchurch in there, 2 Aucklands, and then Wanganui and also Masterton as well. So Auckland might not feature in terms of total volume, but also quite high up on that list. Now, Andrew, when I'm looking at these factors that the Herald and One Roof have looked at, affordability, amenities, employment, these aren't the same factors that we necessarily look at for investors. So what's your kind of read on it? Do you agree with what the Herald is saying, or do you think they're off their heads? What's your view?
I think that's actually a pretty good list. There's some things there that maybe as an investor I would be less concerned about. But other than what they've got, I probably just look at the historic capital growth, and I probably look at the historic yield. Now, I know, again, the history doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get future growth or future yields, but that's something that I'd look at as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, this was coming out 2 days before Christmas. So I feel like I should give you a little Christmas present
Oh, yeah?
and show you something that you haven't seen before.
Oh, yeah?
That sounds so bad when I say it that way. But
Well, it's hardly going to be what you're thinking. I've seen that plenty of times. I'm talking about a spreadsheet, his ROI spreadsheet.
Well, we're not going into the ROI spreadsheet. I thought I would give you a first look at our version of the Hot 100,
the suburb score,
which you have not seen before. Because we've been working on something similar recently where we're looking at all kind of 1,000 suburbs that CoreLogic tracks in New Zealand. And we've got a whole heap of different data about them that's a little bit different to what CoreLogic has been looking at. So, for instance, we're looking at not just affordability, but we have about 3 different versions of capital growth that we're going to start looking at when we release this in 2025. So not just what has the long-term capital growth been. So, for instance, what's it been since January 2000 to today, but also we're going to look at it on a 5-year basis. So not just what's it been over 20 years, but what's happening right now. Because somewhere like Queenstown, where property prices are going up quite quickly at the moment, maybe I want to hop on that trend.
Okay.
And then also we start looking at it not just on, okay, what was it in January 2000 through to today as an average, but also what happens in the average year. So, for instance, we often talk about that a place like Palmerston North has quite inconsistent capital growth. Over the long term, you'll probably get the same amount as most other places in the country, but property prices are flat for a long time and then they spike, and then they're flat for a long time and they spike. And so you want to take all of that understanding and populate it up into just one single metric. So we're going to start looking at that, also looking at things like, yields and whether it's undervalued or overvalued, all of those kinds of things. But the other thing we're going to do is
the suburbs undervalued, overvalued, or does that go back to?
we're going to do it based on territorial authorities, so
got it.
council areas, because I don't have enough faith in individual suburb data. But then what we're also going to do is be able to weight it in different ways. So let's say you want to weight it as I care 40% about yield. Well, then we're going to take 40% of the final score will be based on the yield. If it's about affordability and house prices, Yep, we can factor that in maybe by 20%. And then for the different metrics around capital gains and overvalued, undervalued, we can kind of weight it. And so I just thought that
You're quite proud of this, aren't you?
Well, I just thought since
so-
Christmas is coming up,
Oh, and
I'd,
you're such
I'd
a-
show you. I'm
Yeah.
big Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho. This is what's going to be coming out in 2025 that we've kind of been working on in the background so that we can not just come up with the Hot 100, but I want to come up with the Hot 1000 showing
You have to just go and better the Herald, don't you?
I need extra zeros. And we're going to, and then we can basically show a ranking of where we think the top suburbs are in New Zealand.
And when will this go live?
I expect within the first 3 months of the year. It's quite lonely being the only data nerd. And why are you giving me that look?
Oh, honestly, cry me a river.
It's quite lonely being the only data nerd in the company, in Opus
Oh, what?
Partners.
Such a load of nonsense.
Well, it is. And so that's why I've been working with some of my new spreadsheet friends, Nerds Anonymous, to kind of throw ideas around and be like, hey, what do you think about this? You know, what if I do it this way? What if I do it that way? It's a beautiful thing. But what I want to know, down in the comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, do you agree with the Herald's rankings? Do you think that East Tamaki, which is kind of reasonably central in Auckland, has a lot of employment in the area, is that the hottest suburb to watch in 2025? What other suburbs should we be thinking about? Let us know down in the comments section of the YouTube video. If you're watching on, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you want to join in the conversation, just Google Opus Partners YouTube. It'll be the first thing that comes up. Right, let's wrap it up there. But please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help us get the message out to more people. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Steve at Night.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
We could be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time.